are going to be talking about back to school. We have a wonderful guest here whom you will meet momentarily, but first I would like to welcome everybody for tuning in this evening. If you have a call or have a question for tonight or a comment, please feel free to give us a call at 781-270-9199. Or if you have a suggestion, question, idea after the fact, please feel free to email me at talk@bcattv.org. And we have those little infestation of fruit flies here tonight, so I apologize in advance. I do want to thank Colleen Moore, who is our volunteer extraordinaire who is directing this evening's show, and she gives up every Wednesday to come and help me out. And I would also like to thank Corey McNeil, who is a staff member here, who is also helping out with the show, making sure that everything runs smoothly. And last but definitely not least, I want to thank my husband Paul for staying home for Daddy Date Night. Hopefully the perler beads aren't going everywhere tonight like they were last night. So hope you're having fun, and I'll see you in a little bit. And now I would like to welcome our guest extraordinaire, Eric Conti.
Yes.
Dr. Eric Conti, but you don't like titles, it seems.
No.
But you are the superintendent of schools, so
I
you
am.
wear the big hat around the corner. So.
I have a big head, so I guess I need a big hat, right?
That's not what I mean. But anyway, thank you for joining me.
You're welcome.
And hopefully tonight, now that I mentioned to you earlier, now that I have 2 children in the Burlington Public Schools, a little more vested in what's going on around town. So I'm definitely interested as a citizen of the town of Burlington, but I'm also interested as a parent. So hopefully we can answer all of these questions this evening, and if I forget anything, I'm sure you can fill in all the blanks of things that I want to know and
Sure.
forgot to ask.
Well,
So,
I'll do
first,
the best I can.
all right, great. That's all we can ask.
That's all we can ask.
How did you get involved in education? Where did you grow up? What did you go to school for? And how did you eventually wind up at 123 Cambridge Street?
Okay, the long sordid history. Well, I grew up in a family of teachers. My parents were both teachers. My mother taught at St. Catherine's in Porter Square in Somerville, and then my dad was a music director for Wayland Public Schools for a long period of time. So I grew up with the knowing that profession. And what was funny is they both, I think, encouraged me throughout my education, and even when I was first seeking a job, not to go into education, which was sort of interesting. So don't do it. So, and so that's you know, where the journey started. Graduated high school, went to school, and then I was working actually in the private sector. I was working for AT&T in an executive training program, and I worked there for 5 years, but really felt I was missing meaning in my work, and I like to work, and putting in lots of time, and at some point I was trying to seek and have some meaning, and that was one thing that my parents, I think, always took home with them, is the importance and the meaning of their jobs. So that's what I knew, and so I left my job and went back to graduate school and obtained my teacher's license and got some training, and then again was fortunate enough to get a job in 7th grade in a junior high school in Rhode Island, East Greenwich, Rhode Island.
That's like the toughest grade ever.
I loved it. The kids were just remarkable, and the energy levels at middle school are fantastic, and they change from Friday to Monday, so it was never the same. They'd be growing or changing, and they were still very curious. So I had, I can honestly say that the years I was teaching, I never worked harder, but I never had more fun in what I did, and so that was, that was fantastic. And then from Rhode Island, I actually went to University of Wisconsin because that was a big change. So
where summer came on a Thursday last year.
That's right. It came on a Thursday. So again, wonderful part of the country. I really enjoyed my time there, and I was very interested in education policy. At the time, as a teacher, you can certainly affect and impact your classroom.
Okay.
And I think you can even take on some leadership of your school. But there are some real challenges in terms of that I saw that public education was facing. I was very passionate about it, and went to the University of Wisconsin to continue my education and do some policy work. So
Okay.
I worked for the consortium. I was a policy researcher, essentially studying education policy, and did some work out at University of Wisconsin in Madison, and again had never participated in a Big Ten sort of school environment, and it was a phenomenal experience. And then from Wisconsin, back to Massachusetts, where I worked on the North Shore. As an administrator, I was assistant superintendent and acting superintendent in Manchester by the Sea in Essex.
Oh, okay.
They regionalized, and I was part of that regionalization process, which taught me a lot, because I always thought that very small districts maybe would be easier, but the trouble with very small districts is you have to wear many hats. So I was doing, you know,
multitasking.
Yeah, so I was like business manager, special ed director, you know, driving the bus. We were all doing everything to get it up. But I learned a tremendous amount in Massachusetts, and then wanted to experience again something else. And the great part of my profession is it happens everywhere. So I headed south from there and ended up in Virginia. Again, by now your audience is fast asleep. So I ended up in Virginia as an
they're getting their atlases out going,
assistant superintendent. So I was in Culpeper County, which is sort of right on the Blue Ridge, right in almost the center part of the state.
Okay.
Beautiful, beautiful part of the world, and much different policy environment, much different, you know, school environment. I think we were talking, you know, before the show, you know, Burlington's 11 square miles, Culpeper County Public Schools, it was 380 square miles. You know, just a very different environment. And it was, again, I learned a tremendous amount, met great people, learned that really parents and students all want the same thing. You know, maybe ask for things with different accents, we discussed, but enjoyed that. And then my mom passed while I was there, and then my dad lives in Arlington. That's where I grew up, and so my dad was alone, and so I had wanted to spend, you know, more time with him. So I was looking for opportunities back here, and Burlington. I saw the advertisement for Burlington, and that's sort of why I ended up back here. So felt like I'm coming home. You know, I did. I grew up in Arlington, and have had, you know, spent some great time with my father, and
excellent,
and have ended up in a district that I think is phenomenal, and whose values I strongly support.
Great.
So that's the sordid history.
And there'll be a quiz on it tomorrow morning at 8:30.
That's right.
Be sure to bring your number 2 pencil. No, sorry. We don't use number 2 pencils anymore, do we?
Oh, we still do, actually. We still use pencils, we still use crayons, we still use glitter glue, we use it all. Paste, so we use it all.
Okay. Now, my undergraduate degree was actually in education. And a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, when I did get certified, they called it grandfathered. But in 1999, I was no longer grandfathered. So now I'm learning that there is a recertification process, and when students graduate, they get conditional certification. And with administrative level certification, is there like a recertification process that you have to go through?
Yes.
To maintain?
Yes, every 5 years, similar to what teachers and principals need to do. Because we work in the public sector, we need to be licensed, and you're required to get so much training and have so many experiences before you obtain a professional license, and then you just need to renew that license. It'd be similar to, I guess, a doctor maintaining their license to practice.
Now, is it still like within Massachusetts?
Yes.
Or,
and there is some reciprocity between states.
Okay.
And of course, I've had licenses in 3 or 4 states, as we've discussed.
Kind of what I was.
But you just need to apply and obviously pay. The state likes getting the fees for licensing, and potentially take some courses or not, but fulfill the requirement, and then, you know, work to obtain your license.
Now, something like tenure, being a tenured teacher, is that just like at the college level, or are there like
no,
high school
tenure is
tenured teachers?
tenure's an interesting sort of concept in itself, and in a longer topic maybe. But I think people sometimes have a misperception of tenure and why why it was created. A lot of people think it was about job protection, and I think really why tenure came about was to make sure that teachers could have some freedom over what they taught. So it couldn't, I couldn't dictate necessarily that you teach a certain perspective, but the teachers could sort of teach what they want without fear of losing their jobs. I think it's evolved over time and maybe wasn't used properly over time. And from a human resource perspective, essentially teachers in their first 3 years are employees at will, and then once they start their 4th year, you require a higher level of human resource action if you were to, do things. But what's interesting now is tenure has really gone away, with the, I think there was a ballot initiative a couple years ago that included the introduction of the new educator evaluation regulations in the state. And so, tenure is really now where it used to be a time-bound process after 3 years. Now, teachers have to earn a certain evaluation rating in order to obtain tenure. So some teachers could obtain it in 3, some might take 4, some might take 5. But it's more like it's tied to performance more than it has been in the past. So the policy environment shifts all the time, as you said with your license, it shifted, and so the tenure rules have shifted as well.
And they might shift again in
another
20 years.
As a matter of state policy. So I don't think it's anything that teachers really think about. I think they really focus on doing their jobs well, and that's what I can attest to here in Burlington. And I would say things like tenure and all that, just they take care of themselves.
Now, again, a long time ago, I realized I've been in Burlington for 12 years now. One of the reasons why we chose to move here is because we heard, just second, third, fourth hand, that Burlington had a great school system. How would you interpret what the school system is like, compared to other school systems where you've served, compared to others in Massachusetts? How would you rate it?
And of course I'm biased, and I'd say that just knowing the people. But what I would say Burlington's strength is, again, maybe from an outside perspective, is they really put students first. And I think, what we really try to talk about is students get what they need when they need it. And that covers, again, a whole lot of things. But I think all the educators I've met, all the people involved in the schools, from the custodians to the CAF workers to the clerical staff, are all focused on doing what's right for kids. And I think that's, you don't find that all the time, and I haven't found it all the time in my travels. And I think I really feel that here. So if you ask me sort of what Burlington's strength is, I would say it's really that sense of community within a community. And I think Burlington itself, as a community, has a strong sense of identity, and I can feel that in the schools.
Now, speaking of school versus town, does the school system get a lot of support from the town?
This district gets a tremendous amount of support from the town. In fact,
not just financial, but like.
No, again, I'm not speaking just financially, but I'm saying financially is obviously an aspect of that, and a very important aspect of it, and we certainly get support from town. And in fact, we get very little financial support from the state or the federal government. Again, we're largely driven by local revenues, and so absolutely. But more importantly, I honestly feel that that social contract is alive and well in Burlington, where I may not have children in the school system directly, but I still understand that a strong public school system is a critical part of a thriving community, and I'm willing to donate my time. I'm willing to, again, support schools financially. I'm also willing to
because when you retire, these guys are going to be the ones taking more.
Well, again, and I think that social contract is critical, and I think it's an important part of how we live, and it's an important part of how we govern ourselves. And I think students learn, children learn through modeling as well as from anything else. Probably most from modeling. And I think when they see that modeling in this community, I'm very proud, because I know then when they become active in parents or community members on their own, that they'll take that with them. They'll take that history and that modeling with them, and they'll continue that that social contract.
Yeah. Now, speaking of support from the town, can you tell me a little bit more about the Adopt a Class program? What is it? Why is it necessary? Because we actually have the telethon, the school fundraising telethon's coming up in about a month on October 15th.
Yeah, the Adopt a Classroom is where a business organization will again adopt a class. It's really straightforward, and they'll work with that class as they move through their grades, and then in their senior year, as students earn volunteer hours, they can have access to some of the resources that they've helped earn along their career. So I think it's important for many aspects, and I think, again, modeling that maybe a private organization actually understands the importance of education, I think is clear to see. Getting students exposed to more than just the school district and seeing and learning about what other folks do and companies do, I think is critical. And I also think it's a way of letting private organizations support schools in a way where they can see the growth of students and have some impact on that.
Now, do they pretty much just kind of handle scholarship funds for when the time comes, or do they also provide, like, we'll talk about this a little later, but like iPads in the classrooms and...
No, again, the school provides all the learning supplies. I think they're mostly focused on the kids and supporting the kids in terms
it's more
of
the kids themselves.
Moving forward. And then, again, the larger part of that is the Burlington Community Scholarship Foundation, which runs the telethon, which is, again, if you need any concrete example of the community support of children and students in the public schools, I think I haven't found an equal to the Burlington Community Scholarship Foundation, and they've even the 7 years I've been here, it's been consistently well over $300,000 that they've awarded to graduating seniors just to help with their choices and with their ambitions after high school. So you just don't see that everywhere. So again, there's clear evidence. I mean, I would win an argument every time with my colleagues about the amount of community support that
do not argue with Eric. You will lose.
That's right. About that, I will. So you will. So.
Now, we had also, before the show started, I was mentioning, I lived in Florida for a couple of years, and they were ranked like 49th out of, nationally in public schools. So there was a lot of homeschooling, there was a lot of private schooling. How do you think, not necessarily statistics, or maybe so, how do the Burlington public schools compare to private schools in the area, or even homeschooling? How popular is homeschooling in this area?
Again, just to focus on homeschooling for a minute, and then maybe we'll broaden the discussion. Homeschooling in Massachusetts isn't as prevalent as I've experienced elsewhere. So when I was working in Virginia, there was a significant amount of homeschooling. When I was in Wisconsin, again, there was much more homeschooling. And I think homeschooling is a great option for certain students and certain families, is what I would say. I think private schools are a great option for certain students and certain families. Not all students can be homeschooled, and not all students can attend private schools. So again, public schools are also critical. And I think that I'm not one of those people that says, okay, the publics are best and privates are not, or homeschooling's. And honestly, it really depends on the situation. And I think parents have to make that decision for their children and for their families, and I respect that. And we're here to support all learners. And again, we will gladly work with private schools, and we do that in town in terms of some of our trainings. You'll see teachers from Mount Hope participating, and we also will happily work with homeschooling parents if they need resources. And in fact, you know, we're just, in terms of Massachusetts policy, we're supposed to be, you know, slightly involved with the education, sort of on the you know, have to approve the plan and do everything and move forward. And I hopefully do that. We do that respectfully and in a supportive way. Again, what's best for each individual child is really up for the parents and the family to determine. But we want to offer a very high quality option. And I think, and again, I hope that we do.
It's still like my dad's argument. We're going to be paying enough for college. We're not going to pay for private school.
But again, and many parents sacrifice because they feel that's the best thing for their child. And again, I don't judge. I think that's an important decision for a family to make, and we'll be here. And so if it doesn't work out, students are welcome to come back, and you know, maybe they homeschool and come into school for a little while and go back to again. That's why I think the public schools are so critical, and I think you know, why they're here. John Adams in the, you know, the Constitution of Massachusetts, the first Constitution, you know, really talked about the importance of having an educated public, you know, to maintain our freedom and our democracy and our way of life. Your bigger question, you know, where does Burlington fall in particular? I think you read a lot about how Massachusetts is, public schools are failing in the United States, how, again, I guess amongst industrialized nations, we tend to fall in the, you know, we rank 30th in some of the international testing. What's interesting is when you pull Massachusetts out of the entire country and you rate Massachusetts as its own against those countries, we typically fall in the top 5. In terms of the international test, top 5 or 10, and some were even, you know, 1 or 2 depending on the area and the subject. So Massachusetts has always had very high standards. I think Massachusetts has always had very high quality teachers and teaching, and I think Massachusetts communities have always valued education, and I think that is demonstrated. We lead the nation in terms of our performance. So Massachusetts is the top performing state out of the 50. In terms of
another reason why I like to live here.
in some of those standardized test measures, that doesn't mean there's not quality in the other states. Again, I've been there, but in terms of an overall population, you know, that's what I'd say. And you know, I think Burlington, you know, contributes to that and is a part of that. So if students are competitive in Burlington, then I'm really believing strongly that they can be competitive internationally, which is really, with globalization, is really what our kids are going to be, you know, how they're going to be competing.
Right. You mentioned test scores, which is exactly where I wanted to go with this.
There we go, the question.
Yeah, I know. Just remember back when I was studying, there was, you know, always the ongoing debate, do we have standardized tests, do we not? Now it seems, how long has MCAS been around?
17 years.
Has it been that long already?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I thought I read a headline recently that they're trying to phase it out.
They are.
And replace it with something?
They are.
Tell me more about that, because I'm completely, you know, I just remember in, you know, 3rd grade taking the Iowa Test of Basic Skills.
Right.
You know.
Iowa Test of Basic Skills is a norm reference test. So it was.
But we're going back almost 40 years. So.
Yes, but I'm saying, which is, there are very good norm reference tests. SATs are norm reference tests. So and those are still around, but they answer different questions. So the question answered on a norm reference test is, how does my 9-year-old compare to other 9-year-olds in a certain population? So you can compare them to a population of the state, you can compare them at a population of the country. So that's when you get sort of the you know, the natural curve, and you have the distribution. If you have a large enough population, that's sort of the norm reference test. MCAS is different now. You know, 20 years ago, Massachusetts established the state standards that you know, that were used. MCAS is a test that is designed it's called a criterion reference test. It's designed to measure students' knowledge of those particular standards.
Okay, and
So
I think that's where the debate came in. It's like, do teachers teach the kids, or do they teach for the kids to pass the test?
right. But again, the standards exist,
Okay.
and we're to adjust our curriculum to the standards. And then MCAS is the test that's designed to measure a student's progress in learning those standards. So
Okay.
it's very different than a norm reference test. So I don't mean to make this a psychometrician's conversation, because again, people are sleeping already. So now the standards
No,
have,
they got the popcorn out there.
the standards have changed again now. So we've moved away from the Massachusetts state standards.
Okay.
Now
How
the
often do standards change? Like,
Well, they shouldn't change that much, because it's a lot of work for
well, I mean,
teachers
it's
to
also
adjust
been
their
over 20 years.
yeah,
but-
to adjust their curriculum. Well, the standards are evolving all the time, but they
Okay.
made a fundamental shift
Okay.
2 years ago, and that's when the State Board of Education adopted the Common Core, which are
Okay.
which is
Remember
again
that little buzz phrase.
which is a again, it's a set of standards, a set of expectations. What do we
Okay.
want kids to know and be able to do? And they adopted the Common Core, which were established, I think, across 48 states. It's obviously very political now, and some are leaving and getting out. But again, from my perspective, because I have to operationalize them, they're just they're a set of expectations.
Okay.
They are different from the expectations that we had been working with. So we've spent a lot of time in the last 2 years learning what the expectations are,
Okay.
what kids need to know when, and then adjusting our curriculum to match what we want to know. Now that's the MCAS test, again, was a test designed for the old standards. The
Okay.
new test now that's designed for the new standards is called PARC, at least, and there are two possibilities, but
Okay.
PARC is the one that Massachusetts is trialing. So again, Burlington students have taken the PARC exam
Okay.
last
Now, is
year.
PARC more of a national based?
It is, again, because the standards are, the Common Core
Okay.
apply to multiple states. So
Okay.
I think the country was witnessing Massachusetts' success,
Okay.
and then
So we wanna
wanting other
duplicate
states
this.
then to have their standards rise to
Okay.
where they were, and they felt having a common set of standards that applied to
Okay.
multiple states. And again, the politics are obviously interesting, but not necessarily important to my day-to-day work. Obviously, Massachusetts is concerned that they don't want to lower their standards
Right.
anyway. So they're saying, if we'll join this group as long as everyone comes up to our level, and I think they're saying the same thing about the assessment. And the assessment is so new that no one really understands that yet.
Okay.
But they're saying as long as the assessment again is to the quality that Massachusetts has come to expect, then we'll continue to move forward with the field test. But that's a state board of education. That's not a local decision. That's a state
Okay.
board of education decision. So that's how the sort of the state testing world is changing.
Okay.
But we do so many other more important assessments for students in terms of measuring their learning and their growth that we spend a disproportionate amount of time talking about state testing when it really doesn't measure a student's learning or progress. So,
Okay.
and I understand that. Most standardized tests, including criterion reference tests,
Okay.
correlate most strongly to a parent's income in education. So where Burlington generally performs is we're usually an average, high average community. And because if you look at our income distribution, is, we actually are very interesting, again as an aside, I'm sorry, is that we—
No, I'm the queen of tangents, so go ahead.
We have almost equal representation in every quartile of income. So there are many communities that—
So we're a well-rounded community.
well, we're a very diverse socioeconomic community,
Okay.
and I think what sort of that lends itself to some of the data that we're seeing on test scores. What we are most interested in is growth of students, and that's really the thing that the school district focuses on, because again, remember the standard argument and then the test measuring where students are on that standard. If you think about the standards as a mountain, essentially the state tests determine where in the mountain the student is.
Okay.
But of course, where that student starts and where that student finishes
Okay.
makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
So you can have a student who starts 2 grade levels behind and comes into our system, and the teacher works really hard and everyone works really hard, and we get that student to make a 1.5 years worth of progress.
Okay.
A phenomenal year, both for
Yeah.
that student's perspective and that teacher. They can still fail the state test.
Yeah,
So
okay.
absolute scores, again, while important, and while I always want to see them
See, that's why I didn't
be-
want to
be-
go into teaching.
you know, improve.
Okay.
And while I certainly am accountable for them and we need
Right.
to discuss them, I am most concerned about growth. So again, that's what we really look to measure. That's really what we look to provide benchmarks for,
Okay.
and that's we do a lot more with assessment within the school year than state testing would ever show. And so again, we have just phenomenal people, and they really target instruction. So we know, for instance, with our elementary school students who are learning to read, we know sort of what, you know, where they are, what deficits they have, and then we try to attack
Okay.
those deficits and really
So
be precise.
Again, bring everybody up to that level.
Be
instead
precise.
Of,
And again, I feel like the state test scores will take care of themselves as long as we're sort of aligning our curriculum with the
Okay.
standards, which we're going to continuous process. But if we're really focusing on targeting our instruction to student learning and student growth, you know, we'll be fine.
Now, are the tests still a requirement of graduation?
They are. MCAS,
Or-
again, this is so confusing, and because we're in a transition.
I still have, 12 years to think about this, but
Well, they still may be deciding in 12 years, but at least for the next, it's through 2019,
Okay.
10th graders will still be taking the MCAS test, be
Okay.
required to take the MCAS test
so
for
it's kind of like a
graduation.
rolling in, like not really rolling admission, but rolling test.
Well, the state board hasn't determined, it's called competency determination. I have a hard time saying that. They haven't
Yes.
determined what a high school diploma is going to require given the new testing environment. So
Okay.
while they're making that decision,
Okay.
they're going to keep the old rules in place.
Okay.
So right now, typically sophomores take the MCAS test, and if
Okay.
they pass their MCAS tests, then they are state eligible for a high school diploma in terms of the state. We have local requirements
Okay.
as well that are actually higher than some of the state requirements. But obviously, we have students who may need more time to pass the MCAS, and if
Okay.
that's the case, then that's why they're extending it to 2019.
Okay.
So
All right.
again, I'm sorry this is so confusing,
No,
but
no,
we're in
it's
the middle.
okay.
We're
I
in the
think I'm
middle of some
following it.
very
Yeah.
significant policy changes, and it can be a little bit overwhelming.
Okay, so let's go on a couple of other tangents
that's
that are
because
related to
test
trends.
scores are.
Now, I had heard a rumor that children in elementary schools are no longer learning cursive writing.
So, no, actually.
Well, we wanted something different.
Different.
so-
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Actually, cursive is a part of our curricular program. Students learn it in third
I
grade.
heard Burlington's still doing it. I did a little happy dance in my
So,
living room when I heard this.
So again, we
I'm
again,
like, how do you write a check if you
our-
can't, sign your name? And
Our program is again one of our programs, many programs. One of them is called Foundations, and when students learn their letters in third grade, they do learn cursive letters.
Okay.
We don't spend a whole lot of time on it because we have
Oh.
many other things to
you
accomplish.
got all
but-
the test stuff to
But
work
I
with.
checked. I did check that we are teaching cursive as part of our Foundations program in grade 3.
Okay, because I know, when you said the what's fundamentals or
Foundations, the
foundations,
program, yeah.
just
So-
went to the open house at my daughter's school and they used the the foundations and
yeah.
all the little handouts. I'm like,
Yeah,
oh,
they
okay.
go from the earth line to the sky line.
Yeah.
They learn all their
Yeah.
letters.
So, and then the other question, we were talking about 10th grade and kind of like it's a rolling, moving target.
Mhm.
Couple years ago, maybe, I read that Burlington was phasing out the valedictorian and salutatorian
Mhm.
because of competition,
Um,
or
again, how to what Burlington is phasing out, we're actually not, I don't believe we're phasing out the valedictorian salutatorian.
okay.
We're still keeping track of grade point averages.
okay,
I think we're calculating the grade point averages differently with next year's class
Okay.
moving forward. What we are not doing is we're not reporting, we're not scoring grade point averages to each individual student. So students won't have a number anymore, like if you're
Okay.
50th in the class and you're 49th in the class, and we're not doing that for several reasons. I think
Okay.
one is the competition, and another reason is it's not very accurate, and we're looking at averages out to you know, 3 or 4 decimal places,
okay.
and it's just bad math. So it just doesn't make sense. And the colleges and universities that students would be applying for don't.
They're more interested in GPAs.
Well, not that they don't care, but they recalculate everything anyway.
Okay.
So how we're reporting students is more with a GPA distribution. So we're reporting students externally in sort of bands of students. So we'll look at every, you know, you're in the top 5, your GPA falls within the top 5% and the top 10%. So schools will still know sort of where you fall, but if you're 48th and I'm 49th, what I'm going to tell you is I'm not sure that's so accurate. For the top 10, students will still, I'm sure, be keeping track of their GPAs. I'm sure we'll still have a top GPA, which again you would call the valedictorian. I'm assuming you would still have a someone who knows that their GPA is second, and that would be important. And I think we're still going to
make them give a speech at graduation.
Yeah, well, I think the high school is making that determination, but I think from everything that I've heard from Mr. Sullivan and the students who are involved in this conversation, and especially what I know from the school committee, they really want to make sure they honor academic success. So I'm certain that graduation is still going to involve that. But you know, to have people arguing over 4 decimal places worth of average when again
keep that in the Olympics.
It really doesn't make sense. And it's really an internal. When I emphasize this, it's really an internal conversation outside of Burlington. If there's any weighting to grades, basically all that's stripped away, and all colleges and universities recalculate the GPAs, anyway. And
I just remember, like, back when I was applying to colleges again, in the dark ages, some colleges, rumors were they will only admit valedictorians. So I was just wondering, if we don't have valedictorians, how does that affect this student's admission? But
again, I think we'll still have that, is what I'm assuming. And what we're hearing from them is they want to see a grade level distribution. They want to see how you're doing in relation to your peers. Again, not that you're 49th and they're 48th, but again, that you fall in the top 10%, 20%. In where
I was in the top 3% of my high school
class. And they would also see where everyone else is distributed. So that would, that would sort of help, because, some of our students are competing against, my nephew's high school is 3,800 kids, just his high school. So you talk about, a graduating class. It just, that's why I think
3,800 versus, the 300 in my class.
So they really work hard to try to equalize that as best they can.
Okay. So now, what are some of the other? I don't know if you even know if we want to go into this, but what are some of the requirements for high school graduation?
And I might miss some, but I think they're, I think they're very typical in that, and maybe
like
one
X number
area
of years of English.
Yeah, 4 years. I think we do 4 years of English, 4 years of math, 3 years of science, 3 years of social studies.
Foreign language requirement?
Yes,
no?
2 years of foreign language. Obviously, you have to pass your MCAS tests in language arts, mathematics, and you have to pass a lab science MCAS, again in Massachusetts. Burlington also requires students pass what used to be called a 500 to 900 course, but you also have certain electives that you have to take. 3 years of physical education.
Yeah, that's the part that I hated.
And I think you have to take a sophomore and a senior health class. Because I think we want students to be healthy throughout their lives, and many of the challenges students face when they go to colleges or universities, again, academic are one of them, but there are many social aspects that also can be dangerous and not dangerous, but can be distracting, I guess would say, from distracting to dangerous, and we're really trying to prepare the whole child. So that's what I'd say.
Now I'm going to go off my cheat sheet for a second. We were talking about, the requirements, the academic requirements of graduation. My high school happened to also be a vocational high school. Now, I know I understand that Burlington students who want that vocational track go over to Shawshene Tech. How do the graduation requirements compare? Are they the same, or are there like a different set of requirements? Because I'm thinking if someone's doing some kind of vocational track,
Right.
they might not have time for, 3 years of, 4, 4, 3, and 3. And
Right. I think actually a lot of the graduations would be the same. I think they would look a little bit
Okay.
different. I think the days look a little bit different, and I think it may depend whether the Shawsheen grad is applying to a college or looking to enter into the workforce.
Okay.
So, or sometimes both, enter into the workforce and attend college. So, no, Shawsheen is a wonderful option for Burlington children, and I think it's a phenomenal school. We work very closely with them. So I'm not. I don't know all the distinctions that they would have,
okay.
but
they're pretty much generally.
Again, I think the misnomer. They are also very academically focused. They just
Okay.
offer other things. In fact, I love comprehensive high schools. In Virginia, the high schools were all, we had those type of programs within our high school, and I think it allows for students' talents to really, to come out. There's all different types of intelligences
Although I was really bummed because I did go to a comprehensive high school and I wanted to take auto repair because I'm like, I'm going to own a car
Right.
someday. I
Absolutely.
want to know how to
Right.
fix it. And they wouldn't let me.
Right. So, and that's, and those programs are very expensive. So Massachusetts again chose to regionalize those vocational schools, and that's the method we have now. But we're really working hard to try to expand those opportunities potentially, and instead of in the future saying we have only Burlington High School students and only Shawsheen students, for instance, is there a way we can create programming where students can spend some of their day at Burlington High School, go take that
okay.
automotive class that they're interested in as their elective, and then still get a Burlington High School diploma, but have that. But it's a challenge. The day's only so long,
Yeah.
and we have
And
to,
trying to get the transportation puzzle
but-
worked into the.
But
yeah.
we're really trying to expand programming as much as we can.
Okay. Dropout rates. I'm talking about graduation rates. Is there a high, compared to other systems within Massachusetts or nationally, how does Burlington rate with the dropout rate?
Again, we do very well. I think. What does very well mean? I think I've seen very close to 100% graduation rates. Every once, we do have some students struggle once in a while. I think what's great about Burlington is it's really all hands on deck.
Okay.
For those kids, we know it's not a surprise to anyone.
Well, yeah, it's like you start like when the kids are 3 with IAPs and there's reevaluations and you're setting them up for success.
Typically, and it's not the students typically with disabilities that maybe struggle. It's usually students who aren't engaging in their learning, who aren't finding it relevant. So, from my perspective, it's sometimes a programming piece, and I think it gives us opportunities to be as flexible, as we can. We have a great evening academy in Burlington, so we have some students who have full-time jobs, and actually they're required to have full-time jobs during the day, and they come in and they work from 6 to 9:30 at night, and they're doing classes at night. And so doesn't look like a traditional high school, but
But it's still high school level. It's not like a GED equivalent. Or
Right, and
do they still have GEDs around?
They do, and that's actually standards for GEDs are going up, getting harder as well. But again, I think those type of students force us to be creative, and I think we have lots of people who are exceptionally talented at doing that and really trying to get the kids through. Does that mean we're 100% successful? As I said, no, but again, I would put our graduation rate up against anybody's in terms of how many kids we can get through.
Now, speaking of the night, it just kind of triggered another thought of mine. A friend of mine, as well as I heard either on the radio or TV or something, the online high school.
Okay.
That seems like a fairly new concept. Is that associated with a public school system, or is that like a private sector where the student, are you familiar with it at all?
Well, I think there's 2 now in Massachusetts, and I
Okay.
think the state legislation is going to allow up to 5 or 6.
Okay.
And I guess the way I'm thinking about them, and I could be wrong because they are generally new, is I think they're behaving a little bit more like charter schools.
Oh,
So
okay.
there's a separate process and application. I think the state board controls whether they get accredited
Okay.
or not, and whether they become schools or not. I think the school you might be referring to is the one in Greenfield, which I think has been around for a couple years. Students can enroll in the Greenfield
Okay.
school, take the classes, and they can be awarded a high school diploma from Massachusetts from that
Okay.
school. But it's a different type of experience. So Massachusetts does it a little bit differently, where
Okay.
they're operating independently. New Hampshire has a virtual high school, a model that I actually find interesting and I like. There's one virtual high school program for the entire state.
Okay.
They have rolling admission, and so if students need to do maybe summer work or do some credit recovery, or even for a semester if they want to do a
Oh.
virtual experience and maybe come back to their high school, it's a
Okay.
much more flexible,
interchangeable.
it's a much more flexible
Okay.
program, and it's not, you're not losing funding, and it's just it's done a little bit differently. So we'll see which one sort of takes hold. And,
Yeah, because
and
it
I
is
think-
really new.
And I think again, the New Hampshire model, I think, is working very well, and I'm sure as more virtual high schools come online and earn their, I don't know what else to say, maybe earn their charter
For
from the State Board of
accreditation or-
Education, then we'll
Okay.
see.
Hey,
Again, I don't fear choices. I think choices are good, and I think
nice to have options, but
it's-
sometimes too many options can be a little overwhelming.
it can. But I'm saying, again, we don't necessarily have to be the only game in town, and I think we can learn from everyone else, and it forces us to, I think, continue to make sure we put out a good product.
Okay. Now, among a lot of the different aspects we were talking about, like the elimination of, or the alleged elimination of valedictorian, salutatorian, homeschooling, this online thing, part of me is thinking some parents might choose this because of bullying in the schools. Has bullying been an issue in the Burlington Public Schools? I mean, nobody's really immune to it, but
No, and I'd say Burlington, bullying is always an issue, and I think it's an issue that we have to take very, very seriously. And if you ask, 100 people, you might get 100 different opinions. But the opinion that matters most is the child or the family that's involved in that particular situation. So there have been obviously some legislative changes, and those are technical changes, but I think the emotional part of bullying really hasn't changed. And I think what my expectations would be is we really take every incident seriously, and we really try to address it as quickly as we can. And even if something doesn't necessarily fit the technical definition of bullying, that child can still feel bullied, and that
Right.
family can still feel
intimidated.
intimidated. So I think we have to react to more of the emotional aspect of it than necessarily the technical aspect of it.
Okay.
And so again, I hope we try to take every situation seriously. And again, I know we never resolve 100%, everything to 100% satisfaction, but I at least want to make sure that folks understand that we take it seriously, and we move forward, because it's also about programming, and it's also about making sure that children have positive adult relationships, and they can form, and there's no anonymity in schools, and that everyone has someone who they can talk to and report to, or have confidence in. And we really talk more about student empowerment than we do bullying. We really try to focus on the empowering part of it.
It's all in perspective.
Right, and I think if we can empower students to know what to do, either if they're being bullying or they're seeing bullying, then I think then we have more tools, as well. Because I would say it rarely happens in the structured times.
Okay.
Rarely. If it happens typically in the unstructured times, and that's when students really need to be equipped with tools to know what to do.
Right.
Again, I'm not saying it's okay, I'm not giving a free pass,
Yeah.
but again, if there's classroom management and a teacher in front of her class teaching,
There's not the opportunity.
So I'm saying
Okay.
it's really, we're trying to make sure that we have good procedures in place for those unstructured times, good monitoring in place for those unstructured times, and then concurrently trying to give students the tools where they can be empowered to address some of that themselves. And obviously we step in when none of that works, and then we have to, you know,
Step in.
address it.
Speaking of monitoring things, I keep thinking of the world of electronic media. And there's so much out there. Kids are being exposed to all sorts of media, either online, iPhones, you know, little 5-year-olds having their own cell phones. Burlington is instituting iPads younger and younger. How is that being monitored? How is that working? I mean, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it mixed reviews? I mean, what are your thoughts on iPads in the classrooms?
My thoughts on iPads in the classrooms are, again, similar to my thoughts on textbooks in the classrooms. It's a different technology. It's certainly a more powerful technology, but at some point they're just content. An iPad by itself might be an entertainment device, but an iPad in a classroom with a talented teacher can become a learning device, an incredibly powerful learning device, and a creation device. I think sometimes there's a misperception that students are watching videos on their iPads, and that's just not the case. I think
they're texting. No.
Again, maybe they're texting, or maybe they're collaborating.
Little tiny joke,
I think no. Again, you're absolutely right, and that's some of the stuff that we have to pay attention to and monitor. But in the elementary cases, again, specifically, the devices are really being used for creation of content and instant feedback and differentiation, and we can individualize lessons. So you mentioned Cursive. There are programs on the iPad, and usually if you go into an elementary classroom, you'll see small group instruction and kids working on different things. There could be a group of students who, as part of their small group instruction, are practicing their cursive. And if they would typically do that on a worksheet, they'd have to wait to get feedback from the teacher to know whether they were doing it correctly or incorrectly. But the iPad can give them that feedback.
And it saves on paper. Saves trees. It's good for the environment.
Well, again, we use plenty of paper still, but I'm saying, but the iPad can give that instant feedback, and then a lot of the programs and applications that we're using can adjust the difficulty of the task to where the student is showing their performance. So everything gets individualized, and a particular skill can be reinforced. So are they perfect? Are they the silver bullet? The answer is of course not. It still takes a very talented teacher to make sure how the lessons are organized apply to all kids, and for the teachers to get to know the new tools. And that's all they are. They're an instructional tool that I think is very appropriate for 2014. There's, again, an incredible capacity of students to learn differentially on the tools. And I'm seeing kids create some just phenomenal work using them. And I think those are the tools that they're going to be graduating and being expected to use when they leave here. So
it's kind of scary that my 5-year-old knows how to use my iPad better than I do.
Yeah, well, again, it's
no, Mom,
it's very intuitive. And then, as you said, there's no information isn't the challenge now. There's unlimited information at students' fingertips, at all of our fingertips. The challenge now is teaching students what good information is, and what high quality information is, and what the source is.
It's on the internet. It's got to be true.
Right. So that's the challenge, and the skill sets are differently. But the opportunity to teach students how to use the device to help with organizational skills, to help with executive functioning, to again help with collaboration. Last year, 2 years ago, I'm losing track of time, I went into a chemistry classroom, and there was a group of students doing a lab, and there was an iPad, sitting up, and there was a girl's face on the iPad, and everyone, if you looked at it from the outside, you might have said, "Oh, they're chatting," or they're being distracted. And what happened is their lab partner was homesick that day, and they were using FaceTime, and she was participating in the lab while being sick at home. Now, did the teacher tell them to do that? The answer is no. They just are collaborating that way, and that's how they naturally communicate, and it was something that they were working on. And again, I could probably tell you 10 other examples of maybe when they weren't being used as perfectly, but boy, if kids are learning that skill and learning how to collaborate, I think that's incredibly important for them to leave here with.
Wow.
Not something that can necessarily be measured on a standardized test either, but I think
but it helps. It's a tool to help them.
That's
learn.
all it is. So, and I think it's it just allows us to have incredible curricular flexibility again, I think I can talk about it a lot, but what would be great sometime if you wanted to come in, I could show you some classrooms where teachers are doing some phenomenal things. So
I might take you up on that.
That would be great.
I have my Corey filled out.
There you go.
Signed up to be a volunteer at the school.
Well, we need them.
Okay, we only have a couple minutes left.
Oh, sorry, I can talk forever.
Nope, that's okay. Speaking of the information superhighway, you have a blog.
Yeah.
A lot of the principals have blogs. A lot of the teachers have blogs. How popular are blogs now?
I think they are popular.
Does anybody read them?
Well, I think people who want the information and are selective can read them.
Okay.
But I think it's important to also note that it's not the sole means of communication, nor does it necessarily mean that you're communicating effectively. I think our teachers are still calling parents. I think our teachers are still talking face to face. I think as are our principals, as do I. So I think it just adds a dimension of, you know, for us to communicate using blogs, and it allows us to put dynamic information up and potentially get some feedback. So I think it can be effective in that way, and I also think it can highlight some of the positive things that we're doing. So all that's really really important. And you look at the high school principals blog. What I find interesting as well is there's a direct feed right to Boston.com. For Burlington. So if you go to the Wicked Local sort of Burlington feed, they take it right from the news stories about Burlington. They're taking right from the principal's blog. So I think in today's age, it's important for us to be telling our story, because if we don't, then it either doesn't get told or someone tells it.
Well, we were also talking earlier about like all the individual students. There are different ways of learning. There are different skill sets. There are different options. You know, whether it's going back to the homeschooling versus public school. Adults, it's just a different way of getting information.
And our student help desk blog, and it's kid created, and the topics are what the kids write about. There was a post that they wrote about the benefits and drawbacks to iPads versus Chromebooks, two different devices that we have in the district. And I swear they've gotten 10,000 hits from all over the country, maybe all over the world, from practitioners or people like me making the decision on how to do this, getting a perspective from the kids. So,
cool.
For students to have that type of exposure and experience, and if you want to make their writing relevant, how can you make it more relevant than saying,
exactly.
And, it's going to be something that a lot of people read, well beyond Burlington. So, I think the tools we have now are very exciting for us in the field to think about how to use them.
Great. Well, we are just about out of time, so I definitely want to thank you for coming and giving up your Wednesday evening when you could be home watching Big Bang Theory or whatever. I don't watch Big Bang Theory. But thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
And I would also like to thank everyone at home for tuning in this evening and learning more about back to school, so you can go skipping down your hallway going, it's the most wonderful time of the year. Sorry. So thank you very much, and we will see you around town. Good night.